Hi there, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm great. How about you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. The show has absolutely flown by so far. So much I want to get into over the next 20 minutes or so. So let's get to it if we can. Where I wanted to start was with a little bit of context about how sustainability fits into Sodexo's overall strategy. Fill me in. How does it fit into the strategy?
Great, thanks for the question. So sustainability is just definitely a critical part of Sodexo's strategy. So a little bit about Sodexo's business first. So we are in the business of providing food services and facilities management for clients across different segments. And when we bid for contracts from hospitals, from schools, from corporate offices, sustainability is a critical differentiating factor for the clients. So this helps us to, of course, stand out from our competitors and helps us to, of course, meet our clients' sustainability goals as well. So in line with this, we actually have a roadmap that sets out for both 2025 as well as longer term for us to reach net zero by 2040. So we can say that sustainability is a very critical part of our strategy as a company.
And just to pick up on something you say there about it being a differentiator when it comes to that competitive advantage, is that something you're seeing growing, seeing a lot more of? Is that something you're very much seeing in the marketplace now?
Absolutely. When I started in sustainability some years ago, sustainability wasn't that big of a part in, assessing vendors, assessing potential suppliers. But right now, definitely, we are seeing about more than 90% of our clients during the bidding process, during the contract renewal process, they do ask us questions about sustainability, and sustainability forms quite an important part of the overall assessment of a potential vendor. So definitely sustainability is becoming like a license to operate in today's environment.
That is in itself very, very encouraging. Let's look at supply chains for a moment now and the role they play in making Sodexo more sustainable. How big a part of the sustainability jigsaw is it for you?
Oh, it's a giant part of the overall puzzle. So in Sodexo's scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, I would say scope 3 forms around 99% of our overall emissions. So it's a giant part. And supply chain is, of course, a major part of the lever. So it's critical because in terms of supply chain, we don't have 100% control over what our vendors can do. Within our own operations, there is more control that we can, of course, implement. So in terms of choosing the right suppliers to work with, equipping suppliers with the correct policies, the correct evaluation processes, and of course, the right collaboration opportunities, this can help our vendors to, of course, come along with us on the sustainability journey to help us bring down our carbon footprint because they do contribute a big part to the 99% of our emissions.
One thing I'm always fascinated about, though, is how you go about tailoring a strategy for different global regions, because different areas have different levels of maturity of sustainability capabilities. How do you go about doing that, and how do you go about doing that right? I guess that's the key question.
Absolutely. Like today, if you look at Singapore, we import over 90% of our food because we are in food services. So if you don't have enough land to grow food in Singapore, that's already a loss of control in that sense. And of course, when you import food, then of course, you can't run away from the transport emissions challenge. So, and of course, you also have the challenge of maturity, which is the availability of vendors with the relevant certifications, whether it's in sustainable seafood or sustainable coffee, for example. And of course, you also have the challenge of different consumer tastes. So for example, if you look at our region in Asia Pacific, if you look at India as a country, plant-based eating is very advanced. You have majority of the population being vegetarian. But if you look back in other countries, for example, Singapore or our neighbor Malaysia, we do have consumers still preferring to have animal meats within their diets. So of course, when we have to account for our client taste, this reflects the reality in our supply chain decisions as well. So in terms of how we adapt our strategy to the region or even to the respective countries, because in our region, each country is so different and so specific. So I would say we have an overarching strategy, which is to say that we will commit to responsible sourcing practices, for example, but we will adapt it to where it's locally relevant and locally available. So for example, if you look at plant-based eating, for example, we have an overall goal of reaching about 1/3 of our menus being plant-based. And we know that in different countries within the region, we will be at different percentages. For example, India, definitely over 80-90%. But maybe for Singapore and Malaysia, we are hovering at around 30 to 33%, about on target. So we have to understand the realities and not say, okay, since India can be at 80-90%, why can't every country be at 80 or 90%? Because we understand that different markets have different consumer tastes. So the internal I would say tracking mechanisms are slightly different. And we also look at what the respective countries have in terms of supplier advantages. So, for example, if you look at our neighbor Malaysia, we can actually source 100% locally because we do have farmers. We have chicken farmers, vegetable farmers, local agricultural partners that we can work with. But in Singapore, we really have to focus on working with distributors, with importers who work with responsible farmers upstream. So the way that we actually evaluate suppliers would really differ country to country, depending on what's available in the market. And of course, what's the economic reality like in terms of what our clients prefer.
It does sound like a very agile strategy across the different areas. And of course, as you say, you've got consumer tastes to throw into that particular mix. So certainly a challenging environment for you. I'm always a big fan of examples. I love to hear examples of strategies. So how are you reducing your environmental impact through your supply chains? I'd love to know some examples about how you're going about doing that.
Cool. So I'll zoom in right from the start with a specific example. So when you look at food services, a very big part of what we buy is actually cooking oil because we need the oil to create Asian dishes, especially we have stir fry, we have deep fry dishes. So palm oil, which traditionally has a bad reputation because of traditional practices in the past where there were rampant practices, etc. So palm oil traditionally has a bad name. But when Sodexo took on this topic of looking at our cooking oil options, we are quite scientific in the sense we want to look at what's the evidence. So we have considered palm oil versus other edible oils, for example, sunflower oil, peanut oil. And we know from science that palm oil is actually the most efficient crop in terms of land use. It uses 6 to 10 times less land size compared to other edible oils to produce the equivalent amount of oil. So we know that palm oil is the most efficient crop, but we just need to find a way to make it sustainable. So what we have done is we have to work with the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO. They are a nonprofit that actually works with third-party auditors. These auditors go into the palm oil plantations to audit these producers in terms of what practices they are using to manage the land. Are they practicing ethical labor practices? Are they creating a good environment for both the workers as well as for the palm trees grow? So all of these factors are taken into consideration. And for Sodexo, we only purchase palm oil that is 100% certified as sustainable from these third-party auditors. So when we have this certification, it gives everyone, including our internal stakeholders, the government, and also our clients, the assurance that the palm oil that we purchase in our supply chain is coming from a sustainable source. And of course, when people have some questions about why are we using palm oil, then we also come up with the scientific evidence that palm oil is actually the most efficient crop. So here's an example of how we are reducing environmental impact through a critical product that we have to purchase in our supply chain to run our food services.
And that is an excellent example. And I guess through everything you've said so far, the importance of partnerships. Talk me through how you approach those partnerships there to create those sustainable supply chains. How do you go about it? Because I'm sure there are very large organisations you're dealing with, but also, as you're saying, you're going down to farm level. How do you go about those partnerships as one part of that question? And secondly, how do you maybe deal with some of those smaller partnerships?
So we have a supplier onboarding process where no matter the size of the vendor, they go through the same process where we, of course, ask for, the governance documents. Do they have a sustainability process and policies in place? So or for example, ethical labor practices in place. So all of that assessment is done for all vendors, regardless of their size. So I would say for the smaller vendors who might not be able to, for example, produce at the same price point or at the same production level, then of course we adjust our strategies a little bit. And for us, we understand that sometimes because to meet our purchase volume, we do have to work with vendors of a certain size. But we also want to support the smaller and medium enterprises, especially women-owned enterprises, as well as social enterprises who are right now generally on a smaller scale at this point in time. So what we do is, of course, we will really go into a very deep discussion with them to understand what is their current skill. Of course, we also do pilot tests of their products. So for example, we worked with a lot of women-owned enterprises in Malaysia and Singapore. For example, this International Women's Day, we are actually working with, in Singapore, actually Confetti Snacks, which is a women-owned business that upcycles ugly vegetables into nutritious vegetable chips. So when we go into these conversations with the vendors, of course, we understand what's their purpose, why did they even start the business in the first place? And we try to understand from end to end on their side, their process, how are they more sustainable or different from the other vendors? So for this vendor, is because their selling point to us was because they are actually upcycling vegetables that are not as cosmetically pretty and usually discarded. So they're helping to reduce waste upstream. And this is the kind of suppliers that we want to support. So this is why we are bringing them on. And we understand when they are small, it might be a bit more challenging to get their branding out there. So when we bring them on as a vendor and we actually place them into our client sites, it helps to bring up their brand awareness. And what we do is also we have what we call Innovex, which is an annual supplier innovation showcase, where we invite small and medium enterprises, women-owned enterprises, as well as social enterprises, smaller vendors like themselves, to come in and showcase their sustainable and innovative products and services. And what we do is we bring in our operations teams who are based on our client sites and also our clients and also some potential clients that we're working with. We invite them down to come and learn more about these different smaller vendors and what they're doing. So through this platform, we're actually helping to elevate their brand, helping to get their name and their products out there to our clients and of course our operational teams. So this helps to create a network and a ripple effect that helps them to get their brand name out there. And when we help to pilot their products and services at our sites, this also helps to create a feedback loop. So we can actually tell them, based on operations feedback, for example, if you're piloting a new wrap for food in our services, we can tell them based on how operations or our chefs usually work with the wraps, what can be adjusted in the product innovation side that can make this even more applicable or practical for a kitchen team. So this not only helps them to adapt their products to our services, this product they can also sell it to other players in the F&B scene. So through pilots, through introducing them to our networks, through bringing them in as a vendor, we are helping these smaller players to really scale up, and hopefully we will see sustainable products and services becoming mainstream in the future.
Those partners really sound part of a partnership, if you like, in terms you're in it together. How important is that supplier education, though, as part of this? The event you just mentioned sounded fantastic, where that experience is shared, that insight is shared. Is supplier education a really critical part of this for you?
I would say supplier education is one part of it. Suppliers themselves, in today's climate, they are very innovative, very driven. A lot of the companies we are working with are actually startups, started by a lot of youths actually getting into this space as well. So for example, in Singapore, we are actually working with a startup that actually turns spent grains into cookies and granola. So this actually, in terms of supplier education, I would say it's a bit of a both way kind of interaction. They educate us on what their products is and how they manage to turn spent grains into something that can be eaten and it's quite tasty. And for us on our side is really sharing our knowledge and our expertise based on our experience with our clients, based on what we understand, what the consumers would prefer. So, for example, what we will share with the suppliers in terms of education would really be, for example, if you're looking at the education segment where we're working with a lot of schools, where you're working with children from a couple of months to the high school age. Nutrition and bringing in lower sugar options are critical for us. So what we share is really in terms of what the consumer, in this case, are their parents and the school, what they actually prefer. So we tell them that, hey, in terms of coming up with new products, perhaps some of the sugar levels need to be adjusted to make it healthier, make it healthier options for us to bring into the schools itself. So I would say supplier education is a two-way street. It's not just one way, Sodexo telling our vendors what to do. The vendors also tell us why they're doing this and what they can do in terms of adjustments to their products for us.
Fascinating, seeing them educate you in reverse as well, because too often it can be seen as a one-way street. Let's dig into some challenges now. From your experience, what are the biggest challenges been in making supply chains more sustainable?
I think the number one challenge is perhaps the perception that the players, especially the smaller enterprises, that they are not able to provide the necessary volume or even the necessary price points for larger companies or buyers to actually consider. So in our experience, it can be true that sometimes in the early stages, they might not be able to, of course, give a more competitive price because their scale of production is smaller, or they might not be able to meet, for example, majority of our purchasing needs. But I think it's for buyers to practice a little bit more flexibility in their purchasing decisions. So instead of saying I can only buy from, let's say, one or two suppliers, let's do a little bit more work internally to see, hey, let's consider bringing in 3, 4, even 5 vendors, diversify our vendor basket at the same time, and sort of allow the smaller players a chance to showcase their products. And it's also giving the flexibility of piloting and also equipping, and sometimes it's also sharing knowledge with the vendors. So for example, some vendors might already be doing sustainability organically in their products manufacturing process, but they might not know how to talk about it. And that's a critical thing when they are trying to pitch their products to players like us. So what we do is we introduce the different sustainability frameworks to them. So for example, in Singapore, we are working with the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, which is an organization that actually enables companies to actually start their corporate purpose journey, which environment is a part of the impact area. So we are working with this organization to introduce this framework to our suppliers and let our suppliers know, hey, actually, if you're already doing, let's say, more sustainable packaging, waste reduction, you're already actually providing a sustainable product. And here's how you can talk about it, how you can incorporate it into your business development pitches so that you can bring the message out there to potential buyers like ourselves. So through this partnership, we're actually reaching the smaller and medium enterprises to teach them more about awareness of the frameworks and how to talk about it. And of course, identify opportunities together on how we can become more sustainable. So through this, I would say this helps us to overcome the challenge of the skill and of course the price point. And a lot of times it's also helping them to overcome the brand awareness issue.
I would like to dig into innovation for a second, because it can be very easy to think, well, we've got a great strategy in place, we're getting some great results. The temptation can be to rest there and think, well, we're on a right track here. How key is it to keep innovating and coming up with creative ideas to make progress?
Oh, it's extremely critical to survival. I would say right now sustainability is becoming a license to operate. So almost every client is coming to us asking us, hey, how sustainable is our operations and our supply chain? So we can't rest on our laurels. Even though we can have an operations that's running sustainable, we always have to think, how can we become even more sustainable? Because there are always areas to improve on. So for example, things like, okay, maybe in a kitchen context, maybe we are already used to, or even our clients might think, oh, there's nothing we can do much about equipment because energy efficient equipment already mainstream, everyone's doing it. So what else can we do to help cooking become more efficient, especially in countries where renewable energy is not available on the national grid yet, for example, in Singapore and Malaysia. So what can we do as a kitchen operator or food operator for our clients? So what we do is, for example, we think, okay, let's say even though we're purchasing oil that is sustainable, but how can we make sure that we're using the oil efficiently, even though let's say the deep fry equipment is efficient? So what we do is we also learn from our counterparts, our other Sodexo counterparts working in other countries. So what we have done recently is we are working with a Canadian company. They have been working with Sodexo Canada for a while. They have a device that helps the deep fryers, basically the equipment that you use to deep fry food, to become more efficient in using the oil. So it extends the useful oil of the deep fryer cooking oil, and it enables us to save on cooking oil consumptions. So of course, this has a cost efficiency component for us and of course for our clients. And most importantly, it also helps to reduce our oil consumption, even though we are still producing the same amount of food for our clients. So I think innovating, for example, more innovative cooking ideas or approaches is key for us because it's very easy to say, okay, we have done all we can and this is what is available in the market, but there's always something new. There's always new innovations going on. It's just really up to us to go out and talk to people, do our desktop research, speak to potential vendors out there to understand what's the latest thing that we can try out together with our clients.
And that leads us on very nicely to my final question, really, and that's the future and how much further you're wanting to go with your sustainability efforts. What's the ambition? Where are you looking to go next, and how far can you go?
So where we're looking to go next is definitely related to our net zero 2040 commitment. We do want to because we are the first food services company to take such a strong engagement in the fight against climate change, that we have come out to say we want to reach net zero by 2040. So that's our next big thing that we are all the teams are actually working towards. And to look at this, how practical or implementable this is, or how far we want to go with this is, we are looking at our operations and we have identified 4 key levers that we can actually work towards net zero. So number 1 is definitely products. Coming back to our topic today, how can we purchase more sustainable products? How can we make our supply chain even more sustainable? And the second lever is in terms of cooking. How can we innovate even more efficient cooking practices? Be it is purchasing even more energy efficient equipment, or it's innovating how we cook, for example, switching to more steaming and braising methods instead of the more intensive open fire kind of cooking methods. The third lever is definitely in terms of energy. We know that energy transitions are going on in almost every country in the world, and we are working closely with the governments and of course the energy providers in each country to understand what the renewable energy options are and how we can actually tap on it. And last but not least, the fourth lever is definitely looking at our waste. In food service and facilities management operations, you deal with waste every day. So it's really up to us to see how can we work with our operational teams, how can we work with people that we serve every day to of course, prevent waste from happening in the first place if possible. And if not, how can we create a circular loop where we actually look at ways on how to recycle and upcycle waste and ultimately divert waste away from landfills and incinerators. So overall, I would say we have identified 4 key levers that we can work on to work towards net zero 2040, and hopefully we will have a healthier planet by that time.
Very ambitious, very exciting. Jeannie, thank you so much for going through all of that strategy with us. There's so many exciting parts in what is such a complicated supply chain, but thank you so much for joining us here at Sustainability Live Singapore.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you. You're very, very welcome indeed.